everybody, it's Tactard Ted. It is Tuesday, the 11th of October, afternoon edition. So, who's the man of the hour? Who's the man of the day? Who's the man of the week? That will be General Surovikin, the commander of Russian forces in Ukraine. Welcome to the job, buddy. You're doing a good job. Better known in some circles as General Armageddon. I believe the title might be a little overblown, but we'll wait and see. So, after the big shitstorm yesterday of all the attacks on infrastructure inside Ukraine, there was a general sense of worry, a concern among many Russians that this would be a one-day, because they'd seen it before. They would launch a bunch of cruise missile attacks and then wouldn't follow it up the next day. And at the end of the day yesterday, the analysts, the people who get paid a lot of money to think and make shit up hoping it's right, they were all saying that it was going to take Ukraine about 20 days to repair the damage to the infrastructure. So 20 days isn't a lot of time, just a little short of 3 weeks, and everything would be back up and running, which would put us right about the beginning of November. Now, after the attacks of today, and yes, the attacks today, which I'll get to in a second, we are now looking at 30 days to have everything back and running in Ukraine. And the interesting thing about that, if you go into the Ukrainian channels and look at what the Ukrainians are saying, they're claiming that a spy, yes, a spy with the Russians, said that they intend to hit infrastructure targets all week long. Now, if you hit infrastructure targets all week long, knowing that you're going to put it 10 to 20 days back every time you hit, they're not going to have this shit fixed by the end of the year. And so what does that mean? Well, it gets very, very cold starting in November. It's cold now. It's going to be very cold by the end of November. It will be shit-ass frigid come New Year's. So, what is happening? What is happening now? Apparently today, they changed up a few of the targets. They weren't simply going after just power plants and infrastructure like that. They've also started knocking out the rail systems, especially the rail systems in Western Ukraine. Now, why would you want to knock out the rail systems in Western Ukraine? Well, it's really simple. The Ukrainians have spent their allowance of new vehicles and shit with these failed offensives in Kherson, and the offensive that gained land. It gained a bunch of forest land and abandoned villages, but no cities up around Kharkiv. They've wasted through a bunch of military vehicles. They have shot their armor in the ass again. When you're daily losing over 100 vehicles, and some of these places are giving them less than 100 vehicles, it doesn't take long to burn through your new Polish T-72 tanks, your 113s and the Dutch variants. It doesn't take you long to expend all that shit. And apparently Zelensky called Biden and begged for air defense system. Their state-of-the-art air defense system that they claim to have had obviously isn't doing the job. They seem to be having an issue with the majority of Russian missiles getting in. So Zelensky is wanting, I'm sure they're going to send him Patriot batteries. And the Patriot batteries are just not as integrated as a lot of the other air defense systems that are out there. But hey, it's what we have. We put a lot of money into fighter aircraft, not so much into air defense. And where the Patriot batteries during the Gulf Wars were great because they could take out the random Scud, they can't handle 10 to 15 missiles at a shot. They are not being put in small batteries, and a battery here and a battery there, they're not capable of becoming a net to catch everything that comes rolling in. And the Russians are overwhelming the Ukrainian air defenses without a whole lot of effort. So you need to cut the railroads in Western Ukraine to make sure that these new Patriot batteries and other new toys that are going to be gifted to the Ukrainians aren't going to make it into Ukraine via rail lines. And they've started taking out the rail systems. Also, and I've made mention of it before, maybe some of you guys aren't aware, the majority of locomotives in Eastern Europe are electric locomotives. They run with electric cables over top of the train. And that's how they're powered. They're powered by electricity, not by diesel. Well, apparently, they are now trying to get diesel locomotives because the Russians are being very successful in taking out the electric grid. So guess what? If there's no electricity, your electric trains don't work. So the Ukrainians are making a lot of attempts to adapt, and that's what you do in war. When somebody fucks up your plans, you try to move on to plan B, C, or D, or F and continue to move forward. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Ukrainians cope with all that. But more important, if you're going to have trains, you've got to have rails. And apparently the Russians are now removing the rails. They are messing up the rail lines, not one place, not two places, 3 or 4 places, and they're destroying the junctions, the hubs. Now you may say, well, gee, Dave, what's going on in the front? Why aren't they attacking along the front? They seem to be doing a lot of missile lobbing. Yeah, they're doing a lot of missile lobbing. And I mentioned the weather before. This comes at a very opportune moment, because as the fall rains turn the terrain to a quagmire, your troops aren't going anywhere. And the Russians are hunkered down. They have good artillery positions. And they're continuing to whittle down the enemy. Now, I'm not going to lie. There's no sense in lying. I don't lie about any of this. I tell you a lot of things you may not want to hear and a lot of things you don't believe, but they are rooted in truth. The Ukrainians are getting a rest right now. The Russians can't throw everything at it because they're more focused right now on taking out the infrastructure, which is going to benefit them, because if you remove the opportunity for the troops to be fed so they don't have beans and bullets, so they're not getting equipment, they're not getting ammunition, you're just as well as killing them, because you're taking them out of the fight. You're making them so that they're going to be easily overtaken. And considering the state of the roads and the degrading situation with rain, the Russians are happy to continually work their air assets, to continually work the cruise missiles. And they're whittling down the infrastructure repeatedly. Now, if they do carry out a week's worth of raids, you're going to be talking about Stone Age Ukraine. Banderistan is not going to be in very good shape at all. And it's just a matter of time. You're carving out everything behind the front lines. You're making a hollow shell that's going to be easier to crack. And there's some other interesting things going on. There's video that is showing up out of the Kharkov region, which ought to be setting off alarm bells with the Ukrainians and with the U.S. intelligence people that are trying to run the show for Ukraine. With the radio stations knocked out because of lack of power, the Russians are continuing to broadcast on civilian band radio into the Kharkov region with a very simple, very easily understood mission. We are Russian soldiers. We are conducting a special military operation in Ukraine. We are going to be conducting many operations in Kharkov in the coming days. If you want to minimize the risk of yourself, you need to leave Kharkov at once. Now, I don't particularly agree with telegraphing what you're going to do. But I do also understand the Russians have taken pains to minimize civilian casualties, no matter what the West has been telling you. And it fits along with their idea that the Ukrainian civilians are not their enemy. It's the Ukrainian government. And that's the way they continue to conduct the operations. I think that that needs to be of concern. The concern of what's going on to their northern border, what's going on in Belarus, that needs to be of concern. And Chernihiv and Sumy are not being attacked. Now, if you don't know where those are in the north of Ukraine, above Kiev. Those areas were occupied in the early days when they made the feint towards Kiev. They were occupied by Russian troops. Of all the infrastructure that's being taken out, those areas are not being touched. Sumy and Chernihiv. Why? Well, if you look at the map, there's a big salient there in the border of Ukraine. And that infrastructure, the roads, the highways, the bridges, are tailor-made if the Russians decide to come across that border to cut off that area and be in a very, very close proximity, striking distance to Kiev. And that might explain why Kiev, it's coming out, reports out of Kiev, that Kiev is now mining the roads and destroying their own bridges. It seems to me there's a little bit of panic going on in Kiev. And I think it's probably a really good idea that the Russians bring the war a little closer to the capital, because there becomes a sense when the fighting is over in Donbass or down south that, well, that might as well be another country. It's not close. It doesn't impact me. And that's probably one of the big mistakes of the Russian military operation so far, is they haven't made the war personal for the folks in Kiev until now. Now it's personal. Now they're worried about how they're going to charge their cell phones. Now they're worried about rolling blackouts. Now they're worried about this. They're worried about that. They're worried about how they're going to stay warm this winter. Now it's suddenly up close and personal. It's going to be interesting to see how, what, and why is going to transpire over the next few weeks. And unfortunately, I've said it many times, you don't see it coming. Suddenly, you think things are plodding along, and suddenly there's a rapid end in a lot of these things. It's not a metered response. Suddenly everything collapses and it's done. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not saying that's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not saying it's going to happen next week. I'm not saying it's going to happen the week after. I'm not even saying it's going to be done by the end of the year, although I hear that being bantered around a good bit. What I am saying is, don't be surprised to be surprised, because a lot of this shit is developing in ways that people haven't been paying attention to. And the fact that the Ukrainians have got kind of complacent fighting along the front lines, not really being proactive about all the other shit that's piling up on their borders. Now, they don't mind attacking the border, across the border into Belgorod. They know Russia's there. They've been attacking. They've been attacking civilian villages over there. Now, there's not civilian villages up there. There's military up there. And it's amazing that the attacks across the border in the Belgorod region have whittled away. They've dwindled off. It's almost as though Ukrainians don't like fighting in the military. They would much rather bomb civilians. And I know this is going to go against the grain of a lot of you folks. A lot of you folks believe that Ukraine is as pure as the driven snow. It's not. And that's a part of the problem. I was listening to Alexander McCroyce today, and he brought up something. I was so glad to hear somebody else saying something that I said a few weeks ago, or been saying even this week, is that there's a huge intelligence problem, because the media and the intelligence guys who report and leak shit to the media have been telling us that Russia's done with their missiles. They are out of missiles. They can't replenish their missiles. the missiles are done. They've ran out. There are no more. This is why you don't see anything. Well, I think the last 48 hours has proved that wrong. It also proves that either, number one, the intelligence guys are effectively lying to you, or they're not very good at their job. One of the two. Can't have it both ways. Got to be one of the two. Either the intelligence analysts suck, or they're not good at their job. And this isn't the first time we've been told by assured by the intelligence analysts that Russia is done, Russia's running out of this, Russia's running out of that. Just like, I don't know if you ever noticed, they're talking about all the people that are fleeing Russia. Russia. All these guys are leaving Russia. Same film 14 times a day from 3 different angles, same people. That doesn't make thousands, that just makes a bunch of lazy reporters. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't thousands of people leaving. I will tell you that when the big route started back in August, that is traditionally the busiest travel time of the year. People tend to go on vacation. My wife's aunt, Russian who lives in Russia, is currently on vacation inside the borders of Russia, but she went to one of the far-flung republics that, 10, 20 years ago happened to be in the middle of a civil war. She's there visiting the capital of that republic, and I won't mention it because I don't want to bring any smoke on her for any of the people listening who may not dig what I have to say. But Russians travel. And yeah, you're going to have some pussies running away to Georgia or wherever. Just the same as we had a bunch of pussies run away to Canada during Vietnam. And to a smaller extent, there were a bunch of pussies who ran away to Canada during the Gulf Wars. Remember that? No, sure you don't, because the press doesn't want you to remember that. But it happened. There's videos out there. You just need to be aware of shit. I tend to remember these things. Why do I remember these things? Because it's of interest to me. And I really don't like when somebody tries to bullshit me. Just like all the bullshit now, with the Nazis. No, there are no Nazis in Ukraine. Yeah, really? Well, that isn't what you guys said for the last 6, 7 fucking years. Not at all what you said. Ukraine's not really corrupt. Well, that isn't what you also have been saying for the last 20 years. So I'm not sure why we want to invest so much time, money, and energy helping to bail out a corrupt shithole of a country that has xenophobic folks in there who just like killing people because they don't look the same as them. That's what's the difference? What's the difference between Azov and a Klansman? Really? Klansmen, they don't dig people who don't look like them, who don't speak with the same dialect as they do. No, Klansmen don't like those folks. They like to do terrible things to them. A lot like Azov has been doing terrible things in Donbass for years. But somehow, that's okay. Being a Klansman isn't okay. There seems to be a lot of division here. And I don't quite understand the hypocrisy. If it's okay, it's okay. If it's not okay, it isn't okay. You can't allow the same sort of thing to go on and just turn a blind eye to it. But not only do we turn a blind eye to it, but we support it. Can you imagine if our government started supplying the KKK in this country? Yeah, those guys, they don't have good job opportunities. They're looked down on. We need to support them. We need to give money to the Klan. Or if we gave money in the waning days of South Africa, if we gave a ton of money to apartheid, if we had helped equip apartheid to stop the ANC guerrillas, can you imagine the shitstorm? Oh man, can you imagine? Can you imagine it? But no, we're doing the same thing now. We're supporting folks who do all that shit. And we're not batting an eye about it. And nobody's calling anybody out. And the so-called fiscal conservatives, there's nothing fiscally conservative about dumping billions down a corrupt shithole. And it's going to come to naught. Now, interestingly, it was Stoltenberg said that NATO cannot be allowed to lose this war. Okay, what's NATO going to do? Sounds to me like NATO's threatening to use nuclear weapons. I mean, two can play that game. If you're not going to allow Ukraine to win that war, lose that war, and by losing that war, somehow it's a NATO loss because you guys in NATO are going to prop up Ukraine, and that's your boy, that's your baby, that's your love child. Maybe it's time you guys got the fuck out of doing it. Maybe the corruption in NATO is so profound that NATO needs to be dissolved, or at least America needs to get the fuck out of NATO. I've been saying that for years. Out of NATO, out of the UN. But then again, the UN and NATO are just proxies for the United States. We built those, we pumped tons of money in it, and we're going to dictate to it. And, that's good and great, but I think you guys need to study history. After a while, people didn't want to put up with Rome's shit. And when the barbarians were at the gate, eventually Rome fell. I think the United States needs to be aware of this. If you want to make yourself the center of everything, and you're not just the center of the good shit, you're also the center of a lot of bad shit. When you want to make yourself the center, you're going to attract the barbarians. And when the other countries feel that they aren't getting a fair break from you, they're going to be at your gate. And we're already seeing the fractures in NATO. We're already seeing fractures in the EU. Where's the leadership? Where is the leadership? Where is somebody willing to step back and say, hey, you know what? It isn't worth it. But no, everybody's got their hackles up and it's all about pride. Russia is not going to stop. That's their national security at risk. That's Russia's national security at risk. We put Russia's national security in jeopardy. We're continuing to fund a threat to Russia's national security. Hell, we're providing them intelligence. The only difference is we don't officially have guys on the ground because our government's too big of pussies to be legitimate about it. You know, all this clandestine shit. All clandestine this and clandestine that. Hey, dude, if you're not a pussy, it's like me. I don't wait for somebody to have their back turned to me and smack them over the head with a 2x4. If I'm mad at you and I want to do bad things to you, then I'm probably going to walk up and I'm going to punch you in the face. Why? Because it's only fucking fair. Why do I want to smack you in the back of the head and run and blame it on somebody else? That's not honorable. Where is the honor in that? We always talk about honor, by decisive difference. The top award in the Russian military is Hero of the Russian Federation. Ours is the Congressional Medal of Honor. Honor. Where's that word at? What's that word mean? Obviously, it doesn't mean what I used to think it means. Because I don't see much honorable about the way we're doing things. No, we want to be sneaky little shits, and we wonder why people act like they do. We wonder why fucking little groups of housewives conspire against other housewives. We wonder why this shit happens. And try to backstab each other and shit. We wonder why that happens. Well, why not? Our leaders do it. Our leaders do it on the international stage. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Just a little something to think about. But Tomorrow, folks, hopefully I will not be talking to you in the morning. I'm hoping that everything's going to calm down. Not calm down, but that things are getting into a pattern for the next 4 or 5 days. And we'll continue to see massive amounts of infrastructure being destroyed in Ukraine. Anyhow, folks, you have a good day. I'm out of here. Bye.